So, good afternoon. It is indeed a pleasure to welcome you to the Center for Online and Continuing Education Professional Development session for today. Our guest presenter today is Brett Weiner. Brett is with the department and is a media production assistant. So he helps get all of the media organized and set up to be placed in the courses. And I think we have a fascinating event scheduled for us. So thank you, Brett.
So here we have the Slido. What do simulations mean to you? We have quite a few interesting responses. A lot of them really hit the nail on the head with sort of what I had in mind. And I'll be getting back to this later. This is the first Slido of 2 today. So I'm going to get started on the presentation. So this is today's simulations for educational purposes. And the main goals I had in mind for today was to go over the different types of simulations and sort of understand the basics of that, introducing the ideas of simulations for courses, and seeing how you can factor that in or how you can make it work for your needs. Exploring the different ways and fields that educational simulations are used in, discussing the practical benefits of educational simulations, and determining why a simulation could help students learn. And I also want to bring up that I want today to be more of a discussion as well, not just me sort of speaking. So if there's any questions you have or anything you want to add, feel free to let the COSI FAU person know, and we can discuss that. So tying into the previous Slido, this is sort of what I had in mind for a simulation, and there's a lot of crossover between what I had in mind and what everyone here had in mind. So thank you for participating, everyone. We have visual representation. That's a large part of what people mentioned here. Conveys realism. There's a lot of realism. Real life and play, though, someone mentioned. A realistic scenario, someone else mentioned. So there's a mutual agreement with that. I mentioned details, and I'll be getting into that as well. Technical details, technicality. That's also very much involved. I think someone mentioned mistakes as well here. Low stakes opportunity, someone mentioned in the Slido. I kind of factored that in with learning by mistakes as well. It's a big part of it. Time, and I'll be sort of explaining why I put that there when you get to it, and empathy, part of the whole immersion aspect. All right. So I want to start off by saying, personally, my personal uses for simulations was always more of a hobby kind of thing. When I was a student at university, I graduated a little more than a year ago, a little less than 2 years ago. As a student and a hobbyist, I have benefited enormously from use of simulations. It sort of sparked a personal interest in aviation. I've been doing that since I was in middle school. Sort of a hobbyist simulation with that. And I got my degree in film, and creating my own simulations of various scenes during the planning process really helped boost my organizational skills and gain an understanding of the process, as well as allow for additional preparation for set days. All right. So the definition of simulations, according to this book, a simulation enacts, implements, or instantiates a model. And a model is a description of a system that is to be simulated. And a system contains objects meant to interact with one another. The sort of basis of that is a simulation is just the interaction of objects within a space, and that whole scenario. Sort of the idea is to put us, the viewer, or us, the user, sort of in the middle of that to gain an understanding of the process. All right, some examples of simulations. I'm going to start off with entertainment simulations, video games. We have American Truck Simulator and Euro Truck Simulator for automobile simulations. City Skylines for city management simulation. We have War Thunder for air combat simulation. Kerbal Space Program for space exploration simulation. We have Minecraft for survival simulation, and the entire Civilization series for diplomacy simulations. All those are accessible to anyone, and it's I think all those sort of drive my point in further for simulations in games. For pedagogical simulations used in courses and teaching, we have nursing simulations, banking simulations, biology simulations, flight simulations, which there's a good bit of crossover between flight simulations and pedagogical, between entertainment and pedagogy with flight simulations, because they're as accessible as games are, but they're meant for learning. It's their main purpose. We have physics simulations and we have driving simulations as well. Same thing with the flight simulations, with the crossover between the teaching and gaming aspect. So here we have different types or modes of simulations. We have physical, digital, and hybrid, and I'll be going into each of them. Physical, in this case, is a nursing simulation or a paramedic simulation. Digital, in the use of the image there, is a genetic simulation. And hybrid is, of course, the flight simulation, which I'm going to be mentioning quite a bit throughout today. All right. So physical simulations primarily used in nursing, medical, and criminal justice situations and more. They utilize physical resources and physical spaces. So everything has to be real in a physical simulation. There's very little room for digital. There's no room digital in there. Hybrid simulation is used in the case of the aviation industry. It utilizes both physical and digital resources, and I'll show an example back here. So in the far right image, we have physical levers, physical buttons, physical surfaces, but we also have a digital, we have digital instruments as well, shown there. And it's not shown in the image, but we also have the outside windows as well that are all digital in that case. And lastly, digital simulations are used across many practices and studies, utilizes exclusively digital resources. So it's all done with computers. There's no reality to it. And that's likely the most accessible for everyone. So according to the study, 65% of students are visual learners, and that's going to tie into the visual representation aspect. Of course, when made correctly, simulations can be accurate representations of the subject. That goes back to the Slido as well. There were quite a few mentions of realism and representation as well, and visuals as well. Since the majority of students are visual learners and have a having visual representation will help them understand key concepts. All right, and realism, another thing that was brought up quite a bit in the Slido. So in 2021, simulations are getting closer to mirroring reality. It's going to get better every year. And the aviation industry benefits the most from this, but everyone understands the benefit from realism. And in the case of what already exists in aviation simulations is the different types of phenomenon that are simulated. You have turbulence, drag, air pressure, fuel, and hydraulics. Those are all very important things you have to account for when flying an actual plane. And that's all addressed in simulation as well, since it helps to boost the realism and get a deeper understanding of the subject. All right, and for details, simulations can allow for an unlimited amount of detail. Details are extremely important with coherent coherent explanations. In conjunction with the visual representations can boost the understanding of the subject. And it's worth saying how, especially with visual learners, it helps sort of see things for yourself, how small details interact with other small details, how small instruments deal with other small instruments, how everything works in a situation. So that's very important. And technology. The technology to create simulations is getting cheaper and more accessible. Simulations are created in digital simulations are created in a digital 3D space. The software to do so is right at our fingertips. We have Cinema 4D, 3ds Max, and Maya. Those are all industry standard, which those also cost quite a bit of money to get your hands on. I think it's $215 a year or $215 a month, or it's something. And we have Blender, which is completely free and open source. And that's where I got my start. And that's where I'm going to provide some examples from. Next slide.
Brett,
All right.
we have a comment in the chat. Jess, do you want to unmute and make your comment to everyone?
Hi, sure. So my name is Jessica. I also work at the Center for Online and Continuing Education. And Brett, during your presentation, I was kind of reflecting on the fact that I bet that this generation of students, they probably have a lot of experience interfacing with simulations in their personal lives, you know, whether that's gaming or just, you know, just technology these days. So they probably connect with simulations in a pedagogical environment for that fact alone. Like I can imagine that, you know, if this is something that they're used to doing in their personal lives, they'd probably learn very well through this method as well. So I think this is a great topic.
I completely agree, Jess. Thank you for bringing that up. It's a generational thing as well. It's gonna sort of get more that way in the future as well. So I did supply some sort of elementary physics simulations I provided for myself, which each of the there's 3 of them, and total it took about an hour to make, just total. So here we have a rigid body physics simulation. This is made in Blender, and nothing is actually animated in its traditional sense. I set all the parameters beforehand, and I just rendered it. That was it. Everything reacts how it should react. I can enter in the mass of the object, enter in the velocity, winds, various different physics sensations. And here we have a rigid body simulation where it's functioning more as like a piece of jelly or jello. And the same thing with this as well. The only thing animated in this was the camera. So it took very little time to make this. Of course, you can do any other types of simulations as well. You can do buildings, you can do architecture, all sorts of things. And lastly, we have a cloth simulation here. So again, I set on all the parameters beforehand and just played it, and everything reacts to each other like such. And something I also want to bring up at the very bottom here, which if you're interested in making your own simulations in the future, copyright is important. And here I use textures courtesy of AmbientCG.com, which are all royalty free. But it's always good measure to give credit where credit's due. So yeah, very little time to make, and I had a lot of fun doing it. And of course, there's endless possibilities with this. This is just like a very quick thing I did. You can really take it in as far as you want. Yeah. All right, and going back to the pedagogical sense of it, learning by mistakes. I'm sure my coworkers at COSI will agree with me here, but I've made tons of mistakes in my time here, but I've learned from all of them. And I think in turn that made me a more efficient, effective employee. And it functions the same way in the classroom too, as well as it does in any other aspect of life. So in many cases, especially in nursing or aviation or crime and criminal justice, reality provides little room for mistakes, especially when there's delicate instruments such as with nursing or human lives involved, such as aviation or even nursing as well. You can't really afford to make mistakes. So simulations provide a safe space to make all the mistakes necessary to learn with no financial or human costs involved. And I think that was also mentioned in the Slido as well. Hypothetical situations, low stakes opportunity. I really appreciate that one. I think that very much lines up with learning my mistakes. Because in some situations there's really no mistakes. And time. In conjunction with making mistakes, the ability to control time in a simulation allows for the student to slow down or pause the scenario and take time to understand the subject. Whereas in reality, you can't pause, you can't go back, you can't fast forward. So every mistake you make in real life is there, and you just have to learn from it. Whereas in a simulation, you can learn from it and also quickly go back and see what you did wrong the first time and just sort of more efficiently learn that way, which could be more effective for some students as well. Thank you, Jess. And lastly, empathy. Simulations, especially VR simulations, which I haven't really gone into today, can further boost an understanding of a subject through empathy. The students relate to the reality of the subject, and the student has reason to want to understand the subject. So especially in VR, but in any simulation, you're literally putting yourself in someone else's shoes, and seeing things from another perspective, which is absolutely integral, and it plays into the immersion as well. It really goes into the realism, to the immersion, and all that. So empathy is a huge benefit to simulations. So we have another Slido here. You can I'll activate this. What simulations have you used in the past? This could be for any reason, gaming, hobby, or teaching. You can enter in how you like, but that doesn't have to be anything. So we can just sort of see how everyone sort of benefits from the simulations in their own lives. So same code as before, full screen. Minecraft. That's what I mentioned that before. That's a very good one. Oculus VR, Civ, EMT training. That's very beneficial. That sort of ties into nursing as well. But that's more of a physical simulation, but it can be hybrid and digital as well. RC Heli Flight Simulator. All right. Yeah, no, it's economics markets, economic simulations, and banking. I mentioned some of that earlier and later as well. But economic simulations are very beneficial as well.
Brett, could you identify for those of us not in a slightly older generation what Oculus is?
Okay. So Oculus is just a company that makes VR headsets. I made a broad mention of VR earlier. It's simply putting on a headset and sort of putting you in that active space. So you're not sitting at a computer screen. You're sort of surrounded by the situation you're in. If I'm making any sense here.
So my first and probably rather limited introduction to something like that was the cardboard. The Google had a cardboard one. Was that the same type of thing?
Yeah. It's the same idea, but currently, and I think that was a few years ago, but it's
Yeah.
currently VR is less than accessible for a lot of people. It's very expensive, but I think that Google thing was a response to the price, so everyone can sort of get involved in it.
My name is Ravi Behara. I'm a professor at the College of Business in IT and operations. My background is simulation. That's why I found this presentation of interest. Brett, you've done a great job.
Thank you.
And I've been using simulations at graduate and undergraduate level for about 30 years now. My real question was that what kind of technologies do we have at e-learning or at FAU in general to develop some of these?
Yeah.
I use a variety of simulations. My doctoral work is discrete event modeling, but I've done the number of variety of commercially available simulations. We call them flight simulators in the business school.
Yeah.
Started at MIT many years ago. So I'll, if you could let me know, I'd love to actually work with someone at COCE and even develop some myself.
Hi, Dr. Judy. It's Jess again. I wanted just to share an example of a simulation that has kind of gone through COSI. So we've been very fortunate to work with some of the faculty members from the chemistry department to develop online chemistry labs. So that looked like, you know, basically a panoramic environment in a lab setting with some you know, video, you know, clips of the faculty member, you know, performing experiments. And it also had this really awesome interactive element to it where, you know, questions would pop up. And Brett, this kind of ties back to that instant feedback that you were talking about, where, you know, the faculty member would perform an experiment, and then it would, you know, ask the student, it would prompt them to answer, you know, a question in real time based on what the faculty member was, you know, lecturing about as she was performing the experiments. So that was really an awesome collaboration between COSI and our faculty members here at FAU.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. I'd seen that actually over the summer. This is because of COVID, where the labs were shut off last summer, correct?
I believe development started previous to that, but it was quite timely
Yeah, I think
given what
it was
happened.
used during the summer. I remember that. Yeah. Yeah. If there's any interest, I know at COSI to do something for the business school, you know, I'd love to chat with any of you on that.
Hello, Dr. Behara. This is Marcela, one of the digital media coordinators. We actually, yes, I don't know if you're aware that we're going to be opening a hub, an innovation hub in Davie soon. So we would
Okay.
definitely would love to, you know, collaborate with you. And, you know, if you have any ideas of, you know, how you would like to translate, you know, the programs that you have used in the past, and then, you know, into something that you would like to create, we would definitely love to, you know, to collaborate with you.
Oh, that sounds great, because I teach we have LCVS classes at the College of Business. That's lecture capture video streaming, where we have large number of students, and most of them online. And so I'd like to develop something really that distance learning or LCVS students can actively engage in. Yeah,
That sounds great. We'll definitely be in touch with you,
sure.
and I'll send you some information so we can, you know, we can start brainstorming and create, you know, and get the creative process going.
Yeah, because you know, Harvard has been using this for a long time, and I've used it in my graduate classes, and I developed some many years ago. So yeah, I'd love to do that. So I look forward to hearing from you.
Something I did want to mention that someone entered into Slido, which I didn't even talk about until they brought it up, was AR, or augmented reality, which for those who are not familiar with that, it's sort of the same general wheelhouse as VR, but in the case of AR, it's more to do with the camera on your phone or camera on a tablet or any device, and it sort of creates a 3D object that tracks to whatever area you're in. So yeah, like Pokemon Go, and it's sort of up and coming as well, and that also provides a very beneficial space for simulations as well. Business strategy game as well. That's very good. There's quite a few games and quite a few resources for all of these. So it's a very well researched topic.
And Brett, I will also mention that we did have a previous professional development session, and I'll make sure that we include the link in the when we send what we send out to you. And but Denny Chang did a very little piece of one of his sessions on an AR. It was fascinating.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. I agree that all of these are very good entries for this. A lot of these I've used myself. So thanks everyone for your responses to that. I'm gonna get us back into the main presentation. So some I haven't really gone into too much yet, but that's absolutely essential and cannot be forgotten, is ADA compliance. As with all things, simulations must be inclusive for people with disabilities. And while every type of simulation is different, ADA compliance is still involved in the production of all of them. In the case of University of Colorado at Boulder, they're quoted as saying, our accessible simulations include verbal descriptions and feedback the use of sound and music to represent foundational science and mathematics relationships, and alternative navigation that moves beyond mouse or touch inputs. And some that wasn't mentioned there, but I also want to mention is that as with all games, a lot of them include subtitles as well. So that's definitely doable, closed captioning. So it's not, there really is no disadvantage that simulations are in with ADA compliance. It's media. It's just as important as everything else to make accessible for everyone. And some I touched on earlier was copyright compliance, which is also important. And when using simulations, observing copyright laws is essential. It's professional behavior. It's the way you do things. And in the case of what I did, what I demonstrated earlier with my self-creation of digital assets, I only use CCO or public domain assets. And I'll go back to that real quick with these. Courtesy of AmbientCG.com. Since the textures, which are applied to the sphere in this case, or this case, the sphere and the floor and the stairs, all these are courtesy of Ambient CG. They're all public domain. You don't legally you're not obligated to give credit for public domain work, but it's professional too, and it can't hurt. So, as far as linking to online simulations go, a safe solution would be to point students to a specific URL where the original simulation was found instead of sort of embedding it in your course. It's better just to link it out and to give proper attribution and credit, and really don't make any claims that aren't true. Provided it's on a public website. That's from WPI. All right. And now how it fits into an industry. In the case of aviation, the aviation industry heavily relies on simulations to train pilots. And according to Hartzell-Prop, the benefits of this include enhancing training. So just being able to go up in a plane or being able to go on a flight or helicopters as well, as many times as you want, is a great way to boost that, as practice makes perfect. I guess not really perfection, because even pilots who've been flying or have been working for 20 or 30 years can still benefit from training or benefit from simulations. So it benefits everyone in that sense. It's good for maintaining proficiency. That's sort of speaks for itself there. Proficiency is very important with flying a plane. You can't really, in reality, you can't really make any mistakes. I guess in a real plane, you can't really make as many mistakes as you can in simulation. So the simulation is very beneficial for maintaining that. And practicing communication. That's something I did not mention earlier, but I will mention now, is that in real aviation, there's communications between pilots in the tower, pilots and other pilots, and in that sort of sense. And they sort of have their own conventions of doing that. They use the phonetic alphabet, they use different speaking styles. And that's all included in simulators as well, is usually either interacting with another person sort of role-playing as the air traffic controller or a pilot, or interacting with a computer as well. So simulations are a great way to practice that style of communication.
Fred, I have a question on this.
Yes,
Is that what's covered in, is that sort of some of the stuff that's covered in the flight school, the training?
Yes, yeah. All of this is included with that. But I did want to mention the communication just because
Yeah.
It's not our normal our conventional speaking style. It's a more professional to truly boost understanding and to maintain clarity, because with radio interference or with general port microphones, you really have to be as clear as you can, and that convention helps with that. And improving skills as well. As I said earlier, it sort of ties into the enhanced training as well. Really, anyone who is a new pilot, who is a veteran pilot, everyone has skills they need to improve on. It's universal, and simulations can help with that. Like let's say if you haven't been up in the air a while and you get rusty, simulations are good to sort of help you boost that. And it's all around just great for that. And lastly, mitigating risk. That's probably the most important one from a general safety perspective, because especially for new pilots. I think we had a question.
Yeah, I was going to
Yeah.
say, see another one on there, but I was going to say, if I remember correctly, I believe that the pilot who landed his commercial airliner on the Hudson River credited simulations with his understanding of exactly what to do to keep
Yes.
everyone on that plane safe.
Yes, Chesley Sullenberger, greatest pilot of our lifetimes. So how it fits into an industry in the case of nursing. The nursing industry uses physical simulations to train students. According to healthysimulation.com, no matter how many lectures a learner attends or how much reading they do, there is no substitute for hands-on experience, and yet face-to-face patient experience is often limited in undergraduate education. So that's something that simulations can tackle as well, with those interactions. And how it fits into the industry in the case of banking. The banking industry heavily uses simulations to train students for a wide variety of needs. And for this example, I found it's called Chessum business simulation games, and they're quoted as saying, the goal of Chessum Bank simulation game is to facilitate understanding of the front and back operations of a bank. So I guess in this case, it's a digital simulation that's accessible online for anyone to use. Here are my references that I use all throughout. And lastly, I want to thank you for all your time and coming in here today.